Recording. Okay. Well, we start off the same way. Say your
Sure.
name, spell it, and what your title is.
Sure. My name's Christy, Christy. Alten, Alten, hyphen, Osmera, Osmera.
And your title is?
I'm the Adolescent Unit Program Director.
Okay. Well, as the adolescent unit, so what are the ages that we're talking about here? When do you start? What's your youngest?
13 is the youngest we take, and we go up to 18. Kind of depends on the circumstances. If they're still in school, they tend to be in our program because we do have the teacher on staff. So we've had calls on younger children, and we're just not set up for that particular age because there's such a difference in development at that point. Yeah.
And what's kind of the overriding, or what are the top few problems people have when you see them?
The biggest problems we have when the kids come in are alcohol and drug use. Generally, it's alcohol and cannabis or pot. We do see a lot of legal problems, kids that have been in trouble at school. They're having family issues at home, runaways, some legal problems like theft, that kind of thing. Plus mental health issues. I'd say a majority of our kids do have some sort of co-occurring mental health condition too. Anxiety and depression are the biggest.
So if somebody comes in that has a problem with alcohol and dope, but also has some of these other problems, how do you massage the treatment and which thing do you do first, or do you everything at once?
It's everything at once. It's kind of a big debate for many years, which came first, mental health or chemical dependency. But it's really hard to tell because a lot of the things they're using mimic symptoms of mental health conditions. So we have to look at them both at the same time. Some of that's likely to be substance-induced, their anxiety and depression in particular. The brain, the way the drugs affect the brain is real similar to the same things that are without substances. So the symptoms are there and we can look at them. Then good news is when they stop using, sometimes some of those symptoms will resolve on their own. Sometimes they need some medication, sometimes they need additional counseling, but for the most part, a lot of times they will resolve some of the symptoms they had before. Sometimes the kids come in with a long list of diagnoses because they've been to every counselor. They may come in with ADHD diagnoses, the depression and anxiety, oppositional defiant. They may have a number of diagnoses which may actually resolve while they're here because they're not always upfront that, yeah, I've been using alcohol or I've been using marijuana. That tends to be the last thing that they will come out with. They've been to everybody else before that, yeah.
Do you think adolescents are harder or easier than when you get somebody who's in their 20s or 30s?
I don't know if it's easier or harder, but I get that question a lot. They are challenging, but the changes that we see aren't as dramatic as we do with adults. Prochaska and DiClemente have talked about the stages of change. And it starts out with something called pre-contemplation, and that's absolutely no idea there's a problem. There's denial, there's a lot of anger, and that's where a lot of our kids come in at. They're mad at parents, they're mad at their probation officer, everyone's out to get them. But then that progress goes from, I have no idea I have a problem, to contemplative, which is, maybe I've got a problem. And to us, that's a treatment success, that they've made that movement. Granted, they're not leaving with wings and halos, but they have made progress, and that's the start of the recovery process, is looking at, I need some help. Huge for kids. Whereas adults may progress from that pre-contemplative before they even get in our doors and move to where a preparation for change, the action, the maintenance may even be here, and even some coming in on a relapse. So they've progressed further in that process. So.
It would seem to me that younger kids, because of their the way they view their role in society with their friends and peers and all that's got to be a huge problem.
Yes. The number one reason for relapse with our kids is their friends, hanging out with the old friends. It's dangerous territory, and a lot of them have that belief that they come in, they get their treatment, and they go back to life the way it was, and it's just dangerous. The peers are so important as a teen, and the influence of those peers can cause them to do a lot that they wouldn't normally do. It takes some realization to realize who their friends really are. Sometimes being in treatment, the friends they thought they have stop communicating with them. They don't write, they don't call, and then all of a sudden these old friends that didn't use start kind of coming out of the woodwork to support them. So sometimes it's an eye-opener that the ones still out there using don't really care. For them it's just more, they have more drugs now to use. They don't have to share. But the friends that really do care a lot of times will receive these kids back in, and that's important. That's important to get them with a crew that supports their recovery.
So what, who brings the kids in? Is it parents? Is it authorities? Is it?
Most of the time the kids are referred by parents, but authorities are played a big part, especially at this level of care. They've usually had some significant legal issues. There may be social workers involved. A lot of them may be outside of the custody of their families. So they, Department of Social Services may refer them. Generally, they don't come on their own, but there are a few rare occasions where the kids did ask for help on their own. Regardless of how they got here, they can still have that light bulb moment where they realize, what, maybe they got something there. Maybe there is a problem I need to look at. Oftentimes it's not the way we think it's going to be. We can't go out and say, yep, there's a problem with drugs and alcohol. They've got to start looking at it. Yes, I have a problem with my probation officer, and this is what I need to do to correct that, where substance use is a part of that problem. It's important to get their buy-in into the process, and that we kind of go with what they want to do. Maybe all they want to do is get their parents off their back. So let's look at what that's going to take to do. And sometimes we can meet the same type of goals. Us as clinicians, we always want to see them stop using and have a productive life. But a kid lives in the moment. They want to maybe get mom and dad to trust them again, or they want their phone back, or they want to have curfew a certain length. But we can look at ways we can marry both. And when they have the buy-in, their adherence to whatever we talk about is going to be a lot better. It's okay. Give me a minute.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. I had a thought here about how long does it seem like it kind of snowballs once they start accepting things generally, or everybody's just different?
Everybody is different. Sometimes when they have that epiphany moment and they say, yes, I have a problem, it's easy for them to slip back into that familiar, I don't have a problem. So it kind of moves back and forth between that. It's 2 steps forwards, 1 step back. As long as they're making constant progress, we always want to see them moving forward. But it's not uncommon for kids to test the limits and see if they can use again, and see whether all these treatment counselors know what they're talking about. We see kids come back sometimes 2, 3 times, and they pick up something different each time that will help them in their recovery.
I asked Matt too, what what are the situations that, as you go along, that make you feel like, I'm really glad I'm doing this?
The biggest thing is the same thing he was talking about, that light bulb moment. My light bulb is not so necessary that, hey, I realize I have a problem. It's the glimmer of hope. A lot of times these kids have been through a lot. They've had pretty traumatic upbringings. They've got mental health disorders. They've been labeled all sorts of different things. They may have correctional things. And to actually see that light of hope that says, I'm worth something. I'm worth recovery. Maybe somebody can actually love me. That's where the juice is for me, to see that hope and that glimmer of worth come into them. Because there's so much shame and guilt associated with this. And like I said, most of our kids have been to numerous professionals before they get to our door. And they've been pushed around, and they've failed here and they've failed there. A correctional approach too tends to punish. And after a while, they lose hope. So coming into a place where they're going to be nurtured, loved, inspired, they can make a connection with their higher power here, which is something a lot of kids haven't ever experienced. You know, we see a lot of miracles as they begin a relationship with God, and that's kind of exciting to watch too, because God's going to be somebody that's going to be there with them for the rest of their lives, no matter what. Always loves and always forgives, and that's something that gives them that inspiration and motivation to keep pushing through some tough situations. Our kids are survivors, and I learn from them every day. Yeah.
So we also visited with the Teen Challenge folks.
Oh yeah.
Too, and obviously the religious aspects and that are very important. Why do you think? How am I going to say this without? I mean, there's an obvious reason why you think it works, but why do you think people who are in a bad situation, especially, benefit from that?
Well, we know that this is a spiritual condition. They've had a God, and it's been, Captain Morgan or Mary Jane, and they have sacrificed to that God, and that God has wreaked havoc despite what they've given. They've sacrificed family, school, everything. And to hear that there might be a different higher power, a different God, that they don't have to lose all that stuff, that really cares about them, that's why I think it works. We all have this God-shaped hole in our hearts, and we try to stuff it with everything. It could be relationships, shopping, drugs, alcohol, gambling, video games, and nothing works. And it ends up we get frustrated. And I think chemical use is just one of those things that has tried to fill that void that we all have, that we were created for, our relationship with our God. Yeah.
Good. That's one of the best explanations that I've gotten.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And something, sorry. And maybe kind of a technological end now. The drugs that they're dealing with now are different than the drugs that people grew up in the 60s.
Yes, it's not groovy anymore, right?
No, it's not just that kind of thing. How is it, specific or technically, how are the drugs really stronger than they used to be, and what are the bigger problems now that we're running into?
Okay. Well, alcohol's a big player no matter what. I mean, it's just easy to access, but what we're hearing now more is easy access to marijuana. And the pot of today is not the pot of the 60s. Quite a bit more potent and bred for high THC levels. The latest Monitoring the Use survey indicates close to 40% of our high schoolers are using marijuana. It's alarming, and I think part of that is with all this new propaganda and legislation to decriminalize it. It sends some mixed messages. So marijuana is still a huge player. But I think what we're seeing with some of the other drugs, we've talked about drugs are bad, heroin's horrible, but what they've done is they've moved into some more synthetic drugs, things that are more legal, so to speak. The chemists are going one step beyond always to stay ahead of the law and allow a synthetic high that's supposed to mimic some of the other drugs, and it's viewed as safer, although we're seeing worse consequences from that. The synthetics seem to be having long-term impacts on brain function, mental health. That's really kind of frightening for the kids.
What's an example of a synthetic drug?
A synthetic drug would be, the big one we heard about for a long time was K2. That is a synthetic drug. Recent news have been N-bombs, or is it 25I? Bath salts, another one that hit the news. A lot of them are ways to try and get high and still be within the limits of the law. Yeah. What we're seeing is that they're more potent, for one, and for two, they're altering the way the brain works. Some of our K2 kids that were using K2 on a daily basis look like they may be schizophrenic, where they're having hallucinations and hearing things, and it's not clearing. So it's something that's stuck. It doesn't respond to traditional treatments for the condition. So it can be kind of scary. It is. They sometimes have an impact they don't see ahead of time. Once again, kids in the moment get high and not see the long-term impact. And a lot of the synthetics they don't know. We're learning anecdotally, we're learning to address these conditions because nobody has experienced them before. So we're learning as we go, but unfortunately we're learning from people who are suffering, and it's, ideally we wish there was some way we could help on the front end.
Now I know because of some of the legalization that there's more and more studies being done
Yes,
to just marijuana and the effect it has like on the frontal lobe and the reasoning or cognitive.
Mm-hmm. The recent study I think that NIDA put out, I think indicated close to 10 to 12 IQ points lost over chronic or long-term cannabis use. And I like my IQ points. I really don't want to lose any because of cannabis use. But then once again, kids are in the moment. They don't see that can impact that. It definitely impacts short-term memory. And it also impacts the brain chemistry. So we will see an increase in anxiety and depression, even some of the hallucinations, that kind of stuff with the K2. We see an increase in some of the mental health conditions that may not have ever manifested without that use.
Is there anything we haven't touched on?
I don't know. Anything you want to know? Yeah.
Is methamphetamine synthetic?
It's itself is a garbage drug, methamphetamine. But what we're seeing more and more is that push towards a synthetic amphetamine. They're using things like Ritalin and Adderall because those are kind of in the same category, and they're misusing prescription meds because they're viewed as quote unquote safer than the garbage drug. Remember the commercials with the rotting faces and the sores that we did for meth, that meth is bad, worked, but they've transferred that over to looking into safer ways to use it again, synthetics and your pharmaceuticals. Yeah.
So do you see the silliness, the glass half full, half empty?
Yes.
How do you think we're doing better or worse, or it's like Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill?
Right. I think that they're always going to change. I think if I could predict, I would see us moving back more towards the garbage methamphetamine. We're going to see more of move towards the street heroin because it's going to be easier to get a hold of than the pharmaceuticals that they were using before. So I don't know if, like I said, that chronic emptiness is what they're trying to fill when they use. And until that's worldwide taken care of, I think, unfortunately, the problem's not going to go away. I don't think it's that we're doing any better or worse. I think we're better at recognizing it, and I think we've improved in removing the stigma of it and the stigma of other addictive disorders and mental health conditions. So people, I think, are more willing to get help than what they once were. But are they willing to make the lifetime changes that they need for that recovery?
Great.
Okay.
Whew.
No.
You sure?
All right.
It's so fun to talk